voor lê vir die kursus. En altyd bereid om nuwe dinge te leer.
Fantasties. Baie dankie. Thanks a lot. Andrew, would you like to participate?
Yeah, I am. It's this stage is very difficult. I mean, I can't come to an animal that I can relate to. And hearing and entertaining all the class relations. However, I've got so many other things that is happening.
Sure.
At the same time, and I just feel that I cannot at this stage get to that. You know,
Okay.
I'm overwhelmed with the class. But however, that is also just one of the things that is happening in my life. You know.
Okay.
So yeah,
No,
it's
fine,
difficult
Andrew.
for me.
So whenever during the session you feel motivated to do the sound, you can just tell us. It's not a problem. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Natasha. Unmute.
Wow!
Yo, what was that?
A lion.
A lion. A lioness. Why a lioness?
Op hierdie oomblik sakkie voel ek 'n bietjie content. Ek kry wat ek wil hê of wat ek expected. So and I'm expecting more. So I'm a little bit content and expecting as well.
And you have expectations. Excellent. Thanks very much. That was a good explanation. Philip, you are up next.
Meow.
Just come again.
Meow.
Ah, who wants to guess?
Cat.
Why a cat, Philip?
You know, yes, it is a cat. I feel very content. Everybody knows that in my previous occupation, I was a facilitator and trainer. And reading through this, going through this training, it brought such memories, good memories back, and that anticipation of, yo, I can't wait to do this again. Because coming into EMS and the learning style and teaching style in EMS is totally different to what facilitation and training is. And this just reaffirmed my love for training and the facilitation process and how much I actually miss it.
I'm so glad. Thanks very much. Hopefully you will get an opportunity to apply again and use your skills to the fullest. Thank you very much for that, Vuiswa. Oh, that was quite a realistic sound. What was that, guys?
Sheep.
A goat.
A goat?
Ik kan niet unmute.
Vuiswa, is it a goat or a sheep? What? Just unmute your microphone.
Yes, it was a sheep.
So why do you feel a bit like a sheep today?
You see, a sheep when it saw its child, it jump with the back legs and shake the tail, and it's going to feed the baby, and you can't stop it. It's what I told myself, that I won't stop. I will be like a sheep in this program.
Excellent. Oh, that's a nice story. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fred, your turn.
Wow.
Who wants to guess?
A bat.
A bat?
Maak weer.
Okay. So there's a guess that it's a bird. What kind of bird?
Well, in our country, we call it the swallows. The bird is chirping every morning at my back room. So we say the early bird catches the worm.
Oh, right. All right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how early did you get started this morning?
Well, very, very early. Since 3 o'clock this morning, I'm up. I'm say quick sleeper. So in the morning, I do all my kind of everything that I need to do for the day, for
Yeah.
my responsibility at work, and also to prepare me again for the day, for the class. And that's the excitement I have for this class, to learn new things, to catch everything, to make sure that I don't walk away from here and didn't get everything together to make it happen or to go implement this in my work environment.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Trevor, you're next. You have to do it again. I don't think we got that one. Who wants to guess?
Dog.
Henny, what was that? What kind of hond?
Ek sê dit klink soos 'n hond wat moeg is.
A
Dis seker maar Benny hond.
moe hond. What is it, Trevor?
No, I'm representing my Burbull at
Oh,
home.
is he still a puppy?
He's always happy to see me, and he always. No, it's full grown one.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and he's each and every day he's a happy dog. So I'm glad to be here on the course, and that's what he's representing.
Okay. I hope he doesn't hear you copying his bark, because he's going to feel like a little puppy again from all over. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks very much. Franklin.
Yeah.
Sure.
Can
Do
you
it
guess
again?
that one?
Do it again. Ooh, guess. Who's going to guess?
He's angry at his wife or at the children. It sounds like an angry.
Any other
No,
guesses?
sorry. That's not the case.
Franklin, you have to help us.
I told you before what instrument I play.
Oh.
I'm probably not doing it too well.
So what animal trumpets?
Yeah, this morning I feel like an elephant.
Okay.
I feel much stronger because all the reading which I had last night. So I feel much more motivated, much stronger with all the knowledge that I acquired this few days. And that is the way I feel this morning.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
Much
Thanks.
stronger.
Thank you, Franklin. Yolanda? Do we call you
Good morning.
Landy for short?
Yeah, my name is Landy. Everybody calls me Landy.
Oh, okay. Okay, so guess, what is that?
Hoe klink dit jy en Henny was naby mekaar gewees, jong?
Die donkie is 'n wonderlike ding.
Okay, ja, jy's reg, Pieter. Vanmôre voel ek soos die donkie wat geval het in die put. And whatever circumstances or whatever they put down, the sand and everything, you just shake them off, step on it, and that's the way you get out of that pit again. And that's how I feel this morning, rushing from my home to work, from work to George. And it was a little bit timaka this morning, but today, whatever comes my way, I'm ready. I'm going to step on it, and I'm going to just climb out of this pit.
Excellent. Well done. Well done. Okay, thank you very much. Everybody got a turn because your images moved around, and I must just make sure that everybody got a turn. I think so, yes. So now we've done that activity. I've introduced the activity. I've conducted the activity. And what must I do next? in terms of our experiential learning cycle?
What now?
Well, I must now process the activity. So I must ask you, the participants, what did you experience? What were your observations? How did you feel when you experienced that? When you observed your colleagues making the sounds, when you had to make a sound yourself? Just your general feelings around this activity. So the question is, what? What's your experience? So I'm asking you now for input. Anyone?
Okay, I would say that they were projecting their feelings, what they had felt for the past day or two, and now having a better time now that they are all ready and to do something about it.
Okay.
And as Landi has also said that what has happened this morning, she's going to cover it and carry on.
Okay,
So
good.
A good way of looking at it and looking it forward, and not getting emotional about it.
All right, good. Any other input, please?
I think it is a nice way to get out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. That's a good one. So you feel a bit apprehensive and, oh my goodness, I'm actually not a actor or a performer maybe, and maybe I feel a bit uncomfortable with this, but I'm going to give it a go. So you're actually moving outside of your comfort zone, and you're stretching your experience and broadening your horizon. Next time around, it's going to be much easier to come up with an animal sound and pretend how you feel. Excellent. More input, Landi?
For me, it brings me, it was like there was, it's calmliness, because you are now in a rush, but all of a sudden this bring you to be calm, it bring back the balance, you can laugh, and that's what I feel right now. It brings that calmliness back.
Oh, good, good, excellent. Some more input?
I think it also showed from the learner's side to the facilitator that the learners at this point in time, they are satisfied with the way things are progressing within the training.
Okay, okay, good. Thanks. Any more input? Natasha? Did you enjoy it? Was it fun?
Yeah, to say ons moet nou animal uitzien. To sort of like I felt a little bit on the spot because as you said, I'm not an actor, and then myself sort of it's a bit embarrassing. But afterwards, I thought, no man, let's just go for it and have fun. And I actually enjoyed myself now with this time.
Okay, no, great, great. Okay, so what is the next question I must ask as the facilitator? Remember, I'm processing the activity, so I ask what, and all of you shared your views and your feelings and so forth. So the next question is, so what? So what? Remember your reading that you've done yesterday, or maybe early 3 o'clock this morning, Parafred? So the so what means that we need to make some sense out of the input that I got. And making sense out of it means that we're taking some learning points from it. In other words, what did we learn from that? So it's basically a summary of your input. And I would say, one thing you did mention that you're stretching your horizons, you're moving out of your comfort zone, you're sort of settling down after a big rush. And it's like an icebreaker. We're relaxing after maybe a stressful morning up to 9 o'clock, and we're sort of repositioning ourselves for the training that lies ahead. We also, in a way, getting to know one another better. In a way, how comfortable do we feel to actually move out of our comfort zone? It's also a matter of trust, I think, because we actually build up this relationship as a team where we trust one another. We feel we're not going to make a fool of ourselves when we make all these funny noises. So the next question is now what? Remember, the first one was, what did you experience? The so what is the learning that we got from it? And the next question is, now what in terms of implementation. So the now what is really, do you think that this is an activity that you can possibly use when you facilitate, when you have a group of students? And what's your views on that?
I think, yes, firstly, if you go through so what and now what is that, firstly, what I've experienced out of the whole thing, it stimulates. And it stimulates new ideas and also gives you vision, and also that it opens up, everyone is opening up to one another. And as you said, it takes away the shyness and the hidingness. So there's cooperative interaction with one another without any shyness. So yes, what you can take the same, because it's the same idea can be taken in a workplace and just described in different ways how we can implement it, or I myself I can implement it within my workspace and also with amongst my colleagues and to create the trust to get everybody on board, not to be shy in terms of barriers, languages, culture, and etc.
Okay, no, excellent. Thanks for the input. In my experience, it normally works better with a second day or a third day of training where the audience knows one another or the students knows one another already. If you do it the first thing in the morning, you're going to find it might be a bit stressful, maybe too stressful. Although it doesn't mean you can't try it. Maybe it's even going to work well. That's just my experience that I'm sharing. Okay, thank you very much for that. I hope I'm at the same time when we do these activities, I'm also succeeding in explaining to you the experiential learning cycle that I'm trying to demonstrate and walk the talk and do what I'm preaching. You know, learning cycle, introduce, conduct, process, and process consists of what did you experience, get everybody to publish their responses, then so what is it that we learned from it? And then now what, how are we going to apply what we've learned? And that's pretty much your first chapter of reading for yesterday. And you will recall the content of that reading when we discuss this experiential learning cycle. Are there any questions around the experiential learning cycle? Just touching on the reading that you had to do. If you didn't get around to the reading for whatever reason, please, if there's one chapter that you have to read, I would say this afternoon, definitely, is that chapter on the experiential learning cycle. And that is that page 90 to 104. The experiential learning cycle actually starts a bit into the chapter. You'll see that it starts
page 97.
97, that's correct, yeah. Thanks, Philip. But we will recap just now. I'm just stressing the importance of you reading that specific portion, because when you do your practical, and I hope down the line, whenever you do training, you're facilitating, that you use and apply the experiential learning cycle. Okay, I just want to recap on what we've discussed yesterday. Just by the way, you remember I struggled to share screen when we were in breakout rooms. I did some reading around this, and they say you can't actually share screen when you're in the breakout room. I'm just mentioning it to you in case you might get involved in Zoom training, and you the host or you the facilitator. I'm sure Zoom, or hopefully Zoom, will come up with some solution to that. But yeah, breakout share screening is not possible in breakout rooms. Just a bit of technical information. So we discussed yesterday how adults learn. We know adults bring to the learning experience, to the learning their experience. They want to see a reason for why I'm here. They want to know how am I going to apply what I've learned and how can I actually work differently or do things differently after the training. They also want to learn by doing things. In other words, you would need to limit your lecturing and rather transfer the knowledge and the skills through activities, facilitation activities, learning activities, and it's going to be fun, it's going to be more effective, and they will be able to relate not that activity to their real world, and will be able to better apply it back in their work environment. Learning style profile, you all analyzed your own learning styles, and we looked at some feelers. There were doers, there were observers, and also thinkers. And the important thing with learning styles is that we as facilitators must understand that in a group of, or among a group of students, you will always have those that's got a preferred style in all 4 categories. So you're always going to have students who are feelers or observers or thinkers or doers. And what are the implications of that, or what is the implication of that? The fact that we've got learners that can be categorized in all 4 learning styles. What do you say? What's the implication of that?
I think it's basically you need to be able to adapt your training to cater for all spheres, and always remember not everybody has the same interest, not everybody has the same learning style. So you need to you need to accommodate all the learning styles and always have that in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Philip. So in other words, the facilitation methods that you're going to use, group work, case studies, group inquiry, individual assignments, need to be diverse, so that you can accommodate the diverse learning styles among your students. Then we did the exercise, the rate at which we speak versus the amount of words that we can listen to. And we then identify that there's definitely a danger zone where we're going to possibly lose our audience, because they've got the capacity to listen to much more than what is actually coming their way. And that extra capacity is then used sometimes, if you don't engage the listener, that extra capacity is then used where my mind is wandering and I'm thinking of other things, and I'm thinking of my in-tray and my inbox and what am I going to do the weekend and so forth. So as a facilitator, as a presenter, you want to engage your audience and prevent their minds from drifting to other things, prevent them from thinking about other things. And we talked about methods of doing that. You can ask questions, you can share statistics, you can share personal experiences, use humor, use visual aids. When you use a PowerPoint slide, don't make it such a boring slide. I've seen PowerPoint slides with a lot of writing on it. It's just as if the facilitator is actually using the PowerPoint slide as notes to remind them of what they need to discuss. So keep the PowerPoint slides just main points, 5 points on a slide. Use your pictures, use video clips, and also link that with using your flip chart, for instance, or using handouts, combining it with facilitation active methods that you use. When you get, after you've got the input from the audience, and you summarize in terms of the so what, then put up a slide and say, okay, so those are the learning points. Or you've prepared a flip chart where you've already listed the correct points. Flip over, say that's the correct points, tear it off, put it on a wall. So in other words, everything just needs to work together to continuously engage your audience. They just want to listen to you all the time, and challenge them and ask questions. In that way, the danger zone will be cancelled out, and you will be an effective facilitator stroke presenter. Perceptual modalities. Remember, the perceptual modalities we also discussed the importance that we try to engage the learner in as many as possible of these perceptual modalities, visual, tactile, hearing, interactive. And it's not always possible to accommodate all the perceptual modalities in one activity, but make sure that over a number of activities that you do engage the learner in all the perceptual modalities. Then we just recapped around the experiential learning cycle. I just want to recap now on the danger zone. We've discussed that. We can cancel out the danger zone with statistics, interesting facts, personal experiences, visual aids, learning by doing, and so forth. These are the perceptual modalities, just as a reminder: visual, print, oral, that's my learner listening to us speaking, interactive, where we ask questions, we challenge our learners, they ask questions, we respond, other learners respond. So that interactive, the question and answer sessions. And remember, I used the example of the Socrates method, where Socrates would not give the theoretical statements up front, but would ask a question. And as the students respond, he would ask another question. So he would actually guide their thinking process towards that moment where they say, oh, is that actually how it works? So rather than getting the information up front, going in here, going out of the other ear, I'm thinking about it and I'm developing my understanding of that concept. Tactile, hands-on activities, model building. We had an example of tearing the A4 page into 4 pages, 4 pieces, and then writing A, B, C, D on it, and then we use that as response to a question. So that is a good example of hands-on activities. And then kinesthetic would be role plays, physical games, activities. So we didn't do any of those in this session, but you can just think of when you do first aid training, for instance, what would be an example of a kinesthetic perceptual modality being engaged?
Role plays.
Mm-hmm. So how would you use role plays within a first aid training environment?
Yeah, you just basically set up a scenario and then use it as a simulation, whereby you give the scenario to the students, and then they must simulate the scenario based on the outcome that you've put in front of them.
Right. So you're going to have a patient there that just passed out, simulating that situation, and then your student need to then deal with that situation, and you will set it up with all kinds of props and add to the scene, so that your student needs to apply their minds, think what's the best, interpret, diagnose, decide what's the best action to take. I'm not an expert in first aid, so I might not be using the right example. But another example, I think, of kinesthetic would be the actual CPR on that. What is it? The doll you use. So that'll also be an example of kinesthetic. Yeah. All right. Excellent. So the active training credo, you will remember with your first reading, and we're going to recap that reading very briefly, or aspects of it. But if there's one thing that you need to remember from this course, it would be your active training credo. And it's nothing new, because I'm sure you can relate to this in terms of your own experience, you being a student, you being a facilitator or a trainer. What I hear, I forget. We know there's a study done, and they say you're going to remember between 20 to 25% of what you heard. What I hear and see, I remember a little bit. What I hear, see, and ask questions about, or discuss with someone, I begin to understand. What I hear, see, discuss, and do, I acquire knowledge and skill. What I teach another, I master. I heard a discussion, I think it was yesterday or even the first session, where somebody, Parafred, I think it might have been you, please help me, where you said, look, we have a situation where we ask students to prepare a lecture or prepare a portion of the learning, and then we ask them to present that to the other students. Parafred, was that you or was it?
No, I don't. It's not me. I think it was Philip.
Philip, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, it was me. It just makes the learning process quicker. And like you said, the statistics shows is that most memory is retained when you need to teach someone or teach someone else. So while you're studying, you're becoming the subject expert, so to say. So when you do the teaching, you always have this in your mind that, oh, geez, I must cater for everybody, because just now I get a question that I'm not going to be able to answer.
Yeah.
So you always upgrade yourself, always wanting to find out more about the subject. So when it's presented, you are that subject expert, and that is how your memory is retained. Also with that is that you can go quicker through your training material as a facilitator, and you will see the learning process is much quicker.
Okay, thanks for that. Absolutely. And I'm sure you all experience that the moment that somebody asks you to explain a concept, especially to a group of people, it could be your colleagues even, or maybe a group of students, you just feel that I have to have, as Philip said, a more in-depth understanding. I need to read a bit broader about it. Maybe I focus a bit more to really get around understanding the concept. And then be ready for questions that's also going to come your way. Now, as a facilitator, you need to consider, what opportunities are there to actually ask my students to prepare themselves. And you can ask them to prepare different topics. So in other words, let's say you're going to have 4 topics and you're going to have 4 teams, and you ask a team to work together in preparing, and then one person is a spokesperson for that team who will be making the presentation or doing the lecture. And you may recall that with your first chapter's reading work, there's a method called the jigsaw design, and that's exactly what it is. You have 4 or 5 teams, and you ask them to prepare a topic. You give different topics to different teams. Give them 10 minutes for preparation. They nominate then a spokesperson or then a trainer who will be moving clockwise or anti-clockwise to the next team. So each presenter from each team will go to another team, and that other team will then be lectured on a different topic. And you can move them around so that those topics were all shared with all 5 teams or all 4 teams. So that's a good example of what I teach another, I master. Although everybody doesn't get a chance to actually do the lecturing, but at least everybody was involved in preparing for that lecture. So that's a nice, especially if you have a larger team, it works very well. So in other words, as facilitators, we just need to, in understanding the active training credo, we just need to understand that we have to not only lecture, we have to also show pictures on our slides, video clips, handouts, and then the ultimate, not the ultimate yet, but a very important part of it is then also the doing part, where we actually give them a case study to resolve or give them a group inquiry to resolve. You can ask them to do it as individuals, and then you use the power of 2 or the group work power, synergy, to get them working groups, nominate a spokesperson, then process the activity. What? So what? Now what? And just to recap on the experiential learning cycle then. So we start off introducing the activity, then we conduct the activity. In other words, let's say it is a case study and we break our teams in groups. We're going to say, okay, form 3 groups, and you've got to be very specific in terms of who is allocated to which of the groups. Then you would explain exactly what is expected of them. They would then do it. They would discuss the case study. They would come up with the answers. And after a certain period of time, you reconvene them and you ask the question, what? Give us input. Give us your experience. What are your answers? And that spokesperson will then talk on behalf of the team. Also give the rest of the team, after the spokesperson has given their input, ask the rest of the team whether there's any additional input that they want to contribute, because maybe the spokesperson didn't cover all the aspects that were discussed. And then this is the publishing and sharing part. And then we would ask, so what is the learning that we got from that experience? We interpret those items that they've shared, we generalize it and come up with some learning points. And then we ask the question, sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction. Then we ask the question, now what? And that is, how will you apply what you have learned? And that is the cycle. It looks much more complicated than what it is. It's really a logical process of learning. I can just tell you the biggest mistake that we make as facilitators is that when we get to this phase where we ask the what, and even the so what, and even the now what, is that we tend to jump in too quickly and actually give the answer. You have to allow your audience, your students, to actually give answers from their side. And if there's a quiet period, we tend to feel a bit uncomfortable and we want to give the answer. You should rather then encourage and say, but maybe even ask a question as a trigger, and allow them to give an answer, and even ask a specific students or specific candidates to give an answer. Because sometimes people just take a bit of time, they think about what am I going to say, and they feel a bit uncertain, so they need that encouragement. And you'll be surprised that once they start to give their input, then they're on a roll. Then the one idea triggers another idea, triggers another idea, and you end up with actually more information that you thought you would get. And sometimes you're surprised with the insights that your students have and issues that you didn't even think about. So be patient, encourage participation, and don't move too quickly with your input. Okay, so I would just like to go to your, sorry, any questions? Any questions? Do you feel at this stage, do you feel comfortable already that you will be able to apply this experiential learning cycle? Philip?
Yes, Saki, sorry, man. With the experiential learning cycle, the reaffirmation, the assessment, where does that fall?
How do you mean the assessment, as in a formal assessment? Or,
yes.
Okay. Look, I would think after this learning process, as a facilitator, you do what we call formative assessments or ongoing assessments. So in other words, you will sense, in terms of the feedback that you get from the learners, when you conduct the assessment and you move closer to the teams, to the groups, you get a sense of those students that's on track with their learning and those that falls behind a little bit. So also through questioning, without putting a learner on the spot unnecessarily, but you can also through questioning find out, what learners are actually on track with their learning and who's not. And then we will make adjustments. We will just repeat a topic. We can even give special tuition if you feel that the learner is falling back too much. So that formative assessment, ongoing assessment is part of your tools as a facilitator to make sure that everybody's on track with their learning. And then at some stage, when it's accredited training, for instance, there has to be a summative assessment. And learners then would need to answer a knowledge questionnaire or do a case study and formally answer the questions, write it down. Or if it's a verbal questioning, then you would ask the questions as the assessor or the facilitator on behalf of the assessor, and you would then record the responses of your student on the documentation. Maybe there's an observation checklist. I know in first aid training, that's an integral part of your assessment, is to assess the student performing the first aid activities like CPR or bandage or whatever and then you will have an observation checklist with all the steps indicated on that document, and you're going to tick off as the student actually demonstrates. And we can see that as the summative assessment. You will mark your the results against a model answer that must always be available, and you will then score and decide on whether the student has passed or not passed and what the activities would be. So formative assessment, ongoing, we use that as facilitators to make sure that our learners are on track. And then the summative assessment is more a formalized assessment where either you can conduct it on behalf of the assessor, the registered assessor, or an assessor would then come in to conduct the formal assessment. Or you as a facilitator can also be a qualified registered assessor. So when you're done with your facilitation, you take off your facilitator cap, you put on your assessor cap, and you conduct the assessment. Give feedback, and when you give feedback to the learner, that's where you can again put back on your facilitator cap, your coach cap, advise, assist, guide, tell the learner where they still need to improve, and then make an arrangement for reassessment and so forth. So Philip, does that clarify the assessment story?
Yes, I know we need to do constant assessment. Question is, in the experiential learning cycle, it doesn't form a very big part of the learning cycle itself, and it's not bulleted on the learning cycle. That's just the reason why I asked the question.
Oh, no, sure. When you're done with the experiential learning cycle, you can then do an assessment, because this was the learning. And if you want to assess to what extent was learning effective, then you can do an assessment by asking them to complete a questionnaire or do a formal case study. So yeah, it really fits in after the experiential learning cycle. Okay, so I just want to go to your reading work. And this is going to be a very quick recap. Now, remember the first reading was from page 76 in your manuals, 76 in your manuals. So this is where we find our active training credo. And definition of active training, cooperative learning. Remember, this was the one of the questions as part of our instant assessment on the first day. What does cooperative learning means? And that's really when our learners work in groups. They need to work together. They need to rely on one another's input. They need to cooperate, in other words, with one another to actually ultimately achieve synergy. So it means that learning in a group or contribution within a group would be more effective than the individuals working on their own. Then there's research data, research that was done on this. Then creating an active learning environment, the physical setting. What do you say is the most effective room setup for training?
The U-shape
U-shape.
setup.
Why is that U-shape the most effective setup?
You call it the fishbowl experience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you sit in the half moon or the U shape, all attention is basically on you as a facilitator. And there's no barriers between you and that learner, basically, because what we used to do is we used to take all the desk out and we used to have the seating, only the chairs in a U shape and the fishbowl experience, what we used to call it. And this is where your knowledge gets transferred and there's no distractions. Everybody's on you. Everybody's attention is on you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. That's definitely the case. It also promotes where, when you have discussions, learners can communicate with one another. It's the interaction between learners. They can face one another. Body language, interpersonal skills can be very effectively applied. Where if you sit in a classroom setup, some learners sit with their backs to the other learners. So it's not very conducive for communication and open discussion. If you have a classroom setup and you want your teams or you want groups to be formed, then hopefully you have chairs that sort of can be shifted around, and you can always ask the front row to just turn around so that they form a little circle or can then form a group that can have a meaningful discussion. The boardroom style can also work. It's just, one tend to be limited in terms of the number of students that can be accommodated, and you can also not move in between the groups. But you can move obviously around the back. Hopefully there's space to move around the back, because when you conduct, you want to move closer to the teams doing their work, to also see what's going on within the teams and allow them to ask questions if necessary. Then there's, okay, so I just want to cover some of these areas: strategies and techniques, characteristics of cooperative learning, structure and organization, a moderate level of content. Remember, I referred a couple of times to try to keep your lecturing limited. I know there's sometimes a need, if it's highly facts intensive, then you need to cover a lot of information, then you really don't have an alternative but to lecture. But just keep in mind that danger zone. So keep your lecturing also to be interested, ask questions, share visual aids and so forth. But if in any way possible, structure it in such a way that you have a short lecture and the rest of the learning needs to be through learning by doing and using various other techniques. High level of participation, interdependence is really part of the cooperative learning concept. Minimal lecture, a variety of methods. Peer teaching, we spoke about the what I teach, another I master. Iterative process means that you repeat a certain concepts over and over to embed it with your learners, like I'm doing with the experiential learning cycle, for instance, where I'm trying to provide examples for you, and then we summarized it, and I just come back to the model just to make sure that you do understand it. Real world application, we spoke about the fact that when we use case studies or role plays to make it related or contextualize it for your learners' environment. Then there's design principles, factors to consider: time, cost, quality, suitability, trainer experience and expertise. Then a discussion around videos. Now, currently, you all know that we've got this amazing video library on YouTube, and there's thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of videos available on various topics. I think the challenge really is to find the right one for your specific purpose. And also, obviously, we need to look at quality and does it really allow the learner that opportunity to comment on it, to learn something from it, and also to develop further knowledge and skill, and allow you to actually, through your experiential learning cycle, to take out that learning points. It's no use, the video is a nice fun video, but you cannot really use it to relate to the learning points that you want the students to actually acquire when you do the processing activity. So there's software, I think there's quite a number of software that you can use to transfer or not transfer, but to change the YouTube format to another format, MP4 format that you can save on your computer. Okay, we're skipping through this. They're talking about lecture and obviously the downside of lecture, and then alternatives to lecture. This is on page 84, alternatives to lecture. And this is where we list some of the activities, activities that's also, well, they actually took it from the book, 101 Ways to Make Training Interactive. Did you all manage to download that book? I did send the link via WeTransfer. So were any of you successful in downloading the book?
Yes.
So
Okay.
I was successful.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. No, it's good. It's good to hear. If you were not successful, can I just ask you to send me an email, and I will just try another format. Maybe I can send it via Dropbox or just directly on your email if you have a Gmail account. Okay, so the first one mentioned here is a group inquiry. This is basically where you give a piece of information to your students. They read through it, and if they come across an item that they don't understand, they will just make a little note. You will reconvene the group and you will give each student a chance to raise or ask questions about the issues in this reading that they didn't understand. So either you can ask anybody in the group whether they can respond, or you can respond to those queries. Information search is very similar to the group inquiry. You will give a piece of information, you will ask questions, and they have to then search in that piece of information for the answers. And again, you go through the experiential cycle, handout, introduce the activity, make sure that they're doing the reading and then answering the questions. And you can then have a discussion afterwards where you process the activity. Guided discussion, I've mentioned this is the Socrates method. Socrates guided his students in the learning process by asking them a series of questions. With this approach, the trainer poses questions that draw on the participants' knowledge and experience and require them to think about concepts and ideas following cooperative learning guidelines. Pose a somewhat broad question and ask participants to work in pairs and small groups to come up with answers. So it's really getting to the answer through self-discovery, but with guidance from the facilitator. The jigsaw design we've discussed. This is where you have the 3 or 4 teams, give a topic to each team, they study it, nominate a spokesperson or a teacher who will be moving to the other teams to teach that topic. Learning tournament is where you would ask different teams. Let's say you break up in 2 or 3 teams, you give them a piece of material to study, and you would then ask questions. They would then in the team come up with the answers. When they have the answers ready, you just give a certain time period to the other teams to complete, write down their answers, and then you record their responses. Very similar to the activity around the speaking and listening and so forth that we did. The only difference is that the learning tournament is where you specifically ask your students to study a piece of material. So for instance, when I ask you to do the reading, the next day we could do a learning tournament. So I will then break you up in teams, put the questions to you, respond in your team capacity. I rate your team's scoring and decide who the winning team is. So this is quite a fun exercise. It also sort of keeps you focused. There's a little bit of stress built in because there's a time limit to it. And the competition thing, we want to outperform the other team. And you can apply this especially with a multi-day program where you have the same teams working together every day, and you work out the cumulative scoring of the teams, and then at the end of the course you can appoint a winning team and give a prize and so forth. Quite a lot of fun. The card sort is typically where you have information that you can chunk together. Let's say we do training around safety, road safety, and more specifically road signs. Now, I'm not an expert in that, but I know there's road signs that can be categorized in different categories, like your information signs, your danger signs, etc., etc. Then you can literally print all the signs. Let's say it's 100 signs, cut it out, and then you have your 4 headings, information, danger, and so forth. And you ask your student to sort. In other words, you mix up the little signs, and you ask them to sort the signs in terms of those categories. So that's an example of a card sort. Then they discuss role plays, and more specifically 4 different types of role plays. The scripted one is the one that's most often used in my experience. Then there's a coaching role play. It means that I would interact with one of my students. I play a certain role. Obviously, the student plays another role. Let's say I'm the customer care representative, the student is the customer, and we in this role play, and we stop, or I stop at a certain time before I respond, and I ask my rest of my students. They must coach me and tell me what I need to do, and then I will do it as I'm coached, or I will do it differently. You know, you can play around with this, but the coaching means that you as a facilitator is actually coached by your students, telling you what you should do next. Spontaneous role play is where you just decide within a training session that I'm going to just spontaneously start to play a role. So let's say we're busy with a conflict handling course, and at some stage I'm just addressing Peter, and I just lose my temper totally. And I said, Peter, now, why did you say that specific? Why did you make that statement? And I just raise my voice and create this scenario that is very, very uncomfortable. So nobody else knew that I'm actually playing a role. They thought I'm really losing it. So I can warn Peter up front. Maybe that would be the best, because Peter might just do something that he would normally not do. And my next question, now that is the experience. My next question would be, as part of the processing, and everybody would obviously be quite relieved to see that this was just a role play. Saki did not lose it really. And then I would ask, what did you see? What happened? I would ask Peter, maybe, how did you feel when I shouted at you like that? I would ask the rest of the students to give me their observations, their feelings, and then take from that the learning. You know, how do we respond to somebody just shouting at you? And then cover the correct ways of dealing with conflict. And then we will do another role play where Peter would then demonstrate a specific steps in the conflict handling process in dealing with my shouting and screaming. So this is the spontaneous role play that you can use. Rotating trio role play is where you have 3 participants. Let's say in a customer service environment, you've got the customer, play obviously the customer role, the representative, and then the observer. So when the customer and the rep plays the role of the unhappy customer that's coming to the store and bringing back the merchandise that was broken or whatever, the representative needs to deal with this customer in a certain way. And there's certain guidelines that one would normally share with the rep before the time. And as they do this role play, the observer would then rate against a rating document, would rate the representative's actions and dealings with this customer. Then again, there would be feedback, there would be a discussion around what could we do better, what was done well, and then do another role play with all those improvements built in until everybody feels comfortable that they can deal with an unhappy or irate customer. Case studies. If you want to use case studies, there's nice guidelines here in terms of, if you have to develop a case study, these are the guidelines that you can use. In-basket activities is typically a simulation of an in-basket, where you can use it for time management, for instance, where you simulate various documentation that would normally end up in an in-basket, like application for leave, a production plan, minutes of meetings, etc., etc. And the student or the candidate then needs to sort these items and decide, what am I going to do with each one of these things? What actions do I need to implement? And the way that they handle these different items indicates then to you whether they can manage their time, sort their activities, prioritize activities. So later on, we're going to do an exercise where you're actually going to sort various activities linked to a time management program. And one of the activities is this in-basket activity. So you will stumble across this one again. A simulation, Parafred mentioned the simulation that they would use, instructional games. Now, are there any comments around this chapter? Was there any questions or uncertainty or comments around this reading chapter? Okay, so delivering training, they refer here to, sorry, we're on page 90 now, page 90. They refer here to a pre-session questionnaire, activities before the start of the training. This value of this pre-session questionnaire, especially if you have a group of students that you have for the first time, so you need to understand what's their background, what similar training did they do in the past, what are the issues that they want to be addressed during the training. At the same time, we also want to share the content of the training so that they can already prepare themselves for the course. There's a discussion around, well, there's some pre-session assignments that you can consider to give to your students. In my experience, students are not very good with pre-session assignments. It is just that a relatively small percentage of students would have completed those assignments, and then you sit with a situation as a facilitator, obviously with some that didn't do it, some that did do it, or if you, for instance, ask for them to do pre-reading before the course, and if just one person didn't do the pre-reading, it means that you've got to start from scratch, and you're going to have some of your students that's going to be bored and say, but I actually read this, so why are you recapping on this for the sake of one person that didn't do the reading? So if you give a pre-session assignment or pre-session reading, I think just keep it limited. You don't want to overwhelm the student with too much information. They're talking about manager involvement. You know, the whole training cycle starts off with the need identified. There will be a discussion at some stage with your supervisor, team leader, manager, maybe part of a performance appraisal discussion, maybe as part of a non-performance issue. And you're going to agree with your manager, I want to do that training for the following reasons. I want to improve my skills or improve my knowledge. So there will be this preparatory discussion. Then you attend the training, which is obviously a very important link in the chain. But then the next link is very often not in place, or it's just broken. And that is to go back after the training to implement. And this is when you have another discussion with your manager and say, Chap, I've experienced what I wanted to. I got from the training what I set out to do, or I didn't get it. The training just missed the point completely. obviously there's got to be then corrective actions taken in that regard. But let's say the training did address your objectives. You learned what you wanted to, additional skills that you wanted to acquire, and then it's an action plan of implementation. How are you going to implement? How are you going to work differently? What are you going to change in whatever, project management, of time management, or conflict handling? What are you going to do differently? And even have a control or a check back session where after a week or 3 weeks or a month, give me feedback. How is it going? Are you on track with your implementation? And this is very often neglected. So we enjoy the training, hopefully, but then everything sort of dwindles away. And if we don't implement what we've learned, then eventually it's just going to disappear completely. So it is also important as facilitators that you do the training in such a way that there's always a encouragement of implementation and follow up and regular monitoring and feedback in terms of, are we working differently? Are we more successful? Are we more effective and efficient? Some guidelines around before the training session, after the training session. This is what I just referred to. Delegated assignments, then it's preparation time, rehearsal, seating arrangements. We spoke about the U-shape and boardroom. Then it's showtime, and then they discuss the ARCS model, and the A stands for attention. So you as a facilitator, just from the very beginning, grab and hold the participants' attention using a variety of techniques. So what techniques can one possibly use to grab attention and hold it? What would you say?
The icebreakers?
Yes, yes, icebreaker. And we can use icebreakers basically for that purpose. You know, breaking the ice means that we all relax and we get to know one another, and we just get into the mode of training. You know, we shake off all our stresses and leave our worries behind a bit, and we start to focus on the training. You can also use the icebreaker as an experience to learn from. In other words, and if I can use that example that I used yesterday with a scavenger hunt, where you hunt for signatures, and you can use that learning points as we have to work together, we have to cooperate, we have to not be it's the word I'm looking for, dishonest, etc. But the main focus is on teamwork, working together, sharing of information. That's the learning that we get from that activity. So that can then also be linked with your supervisory or team leader program. And you can then say, okay, these are the learning points. We're going to elaborate on that with all the other activities around teamwork and so forth. So it's just that nice icebreaker, enjoyment of and relaxing, getting to know one another, but at the same time, you take those learning points and you pull it through to also link with the rest of your activities and the rest of your program. It's not always necessary. An icebreaker can just be that, breaking the ice, or if you have learning points, great, then you use it. How else can one grab the attention other than an icebreaker? So you have your students, they sit quietly, you walk into the room, and what then? How are you going to grab their attention?
Maybe putting on some music for them.
Will that be
Just to
pop
get
music or rock music or hip hop?
It depends entirely how you feel for the day.
Okay.
You want to wake them up, you can wake them up.
All right. Okay. Okay. Lundy?
Yeah, Saki, I would say you ask them some, maybe you ask them the questions or what, and then they know, okay, maybe you did not ask me now, but the next round it could be me. So then you must also be on the tip of your chair. And another thing also, you can ask them the questions. So now they know they must stay focused and be prepared, because they must get your answers or what, something like that. I just know how to express it, but yeah, you must ask them.
Yes, that's a very good technique. A very good technique. Asking the question, whoever had a burglary in your house? Let's say our topic is about safety in the home. Your question relates to that topic, but it means that people start to think about that topic, respond to your question. You may even have quite a discussion around that. If that person that you ask did not have that experience, then you may have others that want to participate. So that then leads into your topic, or your topic is about emergency services, and you ask the question, do you know how many ambulance call-outs there were over the past weekend? Now, maybe some read it in the newspaper and they will be able to tell you. Others will take a guess, but at least you've got everybody engaged. That will be quite an interesting fact to know. And it's just amazing how many call-outs are there. And we're talking about the Western Cape. I think there was something like, is it 50,000? Could it be? In any case, it's a statistic that I read in the newspaper some time ago. And also the dilemma in terms of, reaction time, going into communities, dangerous communities, you need the SAP to join. And it's just questions that one can ask your audience that maybe they weren't aware of the magnitude of the situation, of the challenges that there are. But you asking the questions, just keep them on their feet. It also gives you an indication of who's sort of got the answers and who's got a good understanding of the topic already and who doesn't have a clue. So in a way, it also gives you more information about the profile of your learners. You can also share statistics. You can show a graph. You can share a personal story. You know what happened to me this morning when I left my home on my way here. It just get everybody on there to sit upright and want to listen to what you say. All right, then relevance. In other words, the program must be relevant to the needs of the learners. Confidence, design the training and facilitate the learning process in such a way that the participants gain confidence to apply new knowledge, behavior, and skills back in the work. Satisfaction, the artful design of the training program coupled with skillful facilitation of the process results in a high degree of participant satisfaction with the learning experience. Additionally, the participants' ability and motivation to apply the learning results in personal satisfaction. Okay, so I can see Lundy did some reading work because we're talking about icebreakers and openers here to grab attention. What's in it for them? Yes, your learners want to know what's in it for me. Why, how can I benefit when I'm able to do a CPR or I can attend to an accident scene? What's the benefits for me? What's the benefits for other people around me? So you need to also give that information. Preview and coming attractions. It's like keeping the suspense of, tomorrow we're going to discuss this topic and you will enjoy it because of the following. It is just keeping that bit of suspense. It's like the movies, coming up, coming attractions approach. Then experiential and active training, using small groups, the power of two. And then the experiential learning cycle. And I'm not going to repeat this again for now. I may do it later today, tomorrow again, but I think I've said enough about the experiential learning cycle for the time being. But just understand that, if you didn't get around to the reading, this is the part that you really must read, because this is where it gives you a further explanation of the different phases, the experience, the publishing, the interpreting, generalizing, and applying. And then the introduction of the activity, conducting the activity, and then processing the activity. And with processing, we ask the what. Next question that addressed the so what. What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn from the experience, etc.? And then the now what, how can you apply what you've learned on the job or in your personal life? What might you do differently? And how can this experience help you in future? You can record the feedback on a flip chart, or you have a prepared slide with the learning points. And as I said, don't move on too quickly after you ask these questions. Allow time for input. Do not be impatient with your actions. And then there's a template. And those of you who browse through your portfolio of evidence would recognize this template that's also available in your portfolio of evidence. So when you plan for your practical assessment, you have to choose at least 2 methods of facilitation. And for each of the methods, you must complete a creating your own activity template. So if I may use an example and just use the example of, let's say you're going to do a case study. So the name of activity, you're going to write in case study. Who's the participants? It's your students on a first aid course, argument's sake, just as an example. We've got 8 students. What's the objective or the purpose of this activity? Let's say I want my student to be able to assess an accident scene to decide on the next steps. Remember, it's a case study. So the case study will be structured in such a way that the students, when they read through the case study, they're going to answer some questions. They will then have obviously after you've gone through the whole experiential learning cycle, by asking the what, so what, now what, they would have then acquired additional knowledge how to interpret an accident scene and decide on the next steps. Type of training, you can say it's interactive learning, facilitator-led interactive learning. Time needed, 10 minutes. Room setup, U-shape. But I think if you want your team, if you want your group to work in smaller groups, you can just also mention a facility for your groups to meet. In other words, in a little circle, or they have chairs in a circle, or they can sit on the floor in a circle. Nathaniel?
Now you said the time needed is 10, right? You mentioned 10 minutes, but I think the session says it must be 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, but keep in mind that we're talking about one of the activities that you're going to do within the 30 minutes. So in other words, let's say you must have at least 2 methods or 2 activities. And let's say each activity is 10 minutes. That's already 20 minutes of the 30 minutes. You need a bit of time for the preparation, for the introduction, and you also need time for the final wrap up. So that then adds up to your 30 minutes. And we complete, this is not a description of the whole 30 minutes. It's just one activity within that 30 minutes. Okay. Then supplies, equipment, material. You can just say, well, handouts, with a case study written on it with questions. Maybe you're going to put the case study up on a slide or even on a flip chart, then you will add that. Guidelines for the activity, where you can just briefly say, form groups. The instructions would then be as follows. My introduction is read the case study and answer the questions. Conducting, move closer to the groups, making sure that everybody is performing or doing the actions as per your request. And then processing. You're going to say, what do you need? What information do you require when you ask the question what? So you can make a list of the responses that you expect from your learners. It's good to have this list, because if you don't get all the responses that cover all the items, then you need to add those items just for completeness sake. and then the now, okay, the what, so what, and then the now what would then be how are you going to apply what you've learned. And you can make some comments in terms of, you know, learners will go back to their working environments, and they may find an emergency situation within a working environment, and they can apply that accordingly. And then anything you want to add to that. So that was your case study, if you want to use a case study. Another activity could be a video and discussion. The participants will be the same, group size can be the same. The objective of that video is to view a incorrect application of a CPR, argument's sake, and to understand the incorrect application of CPR, and then to discuss the corrective actions afterwards. Type of training will be also interactive, lecturette, so forth. Time needed, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe with a video you need a bit longer. When you choose a video or a video clip, just make sure that it's not longer than, maximum 5 minutes. You don't want your video to run for 20 minutes and then you only have 10 minutes left to facilitate the rest of the process. So the video must really just be a clip. I would say even 3 minutes and not longer than that, but maximum 5 minutes. Room setup, U-shape, supplies, equipment. You need your computer, your a data projector, a screen, and let's say you have a PowerPoint and you inserted your video clip on PowerPoint. You can also add that. Just how are you going to execute the activity? How are you going to introduce it, conduct it? Obviously, when the video plays, your conducting part will just be to make sure that everybody's actually watching the video and making notes as per your request, and then processing what, so what, now what. But as I said, there are specifically in your portfolios of evidence 2 templates, exactly the same. There's one template where you basically describe your 30 minutes, and then the 2 templates where you describe each of the methods that you're going to use. So obviously the methods will then take up lesser time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes for each, because you need to allow time for your introductions or icebreaker or whatever you're going to start with. And you also need time for your wrap up, your conclusion, summary. Does anybody have any last questions and so forth? Are there any questions?
Yes, I just lost you there. Where you say you have one template where you have 30 minutes. Is it the same template that we're using here right now on the screen, or is there a different template to this?
It's exactly the same template. Let me get to the page number quickly.
Saki, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just the two case studies, or the 2 cases that is given. Do you combine that into the 30 minutes, or do you have the 2 different and then another 30-minute case?
Oh no, your total session will be 30 minutes, and within that 30 minutes you must use 2 activities.
Okay.
No, so your activities will be, let's say, 10 minute, introductions, wrap up. That's your full 30 minutes.
Cool.
But we are going to do what we call a design matrix. First a mind map and then a design matrix. Is basically a tool or a mechanism that you use, or a template that you use to plan your training event. So in your case, you're going to have a 30-minute training event, and you're going to then list what are the topics that I need to address during this 30 minutes, and what methods of facilitation am I going to use to transfer the knowledge and skill with my learners. You're going to allocate a duration to each of those activities, and you're also going to have a column where you indicate what's the resources, the handouts, the aids that I would need for that specific activity. So in other words, if you say, look, I'm going to start off my session with the introduction, so that will be the learning point, then your method that you're going to use will be a short lecture. The aids or the instrument, the handouts or the aids that you would need would be my computer data projector, my PowerPoint slide, and it's going to take me 10 minutes. And then you move on to the next learning point, and the total time for that design will then be 30 minutes. Now, as part of the training, you need to come up with a mind map and design matrix for an 8-hour training session. And obviously, I'm going to explain the detail around that. But for your 30 minutes, you will use the same process, the same template. It is just instead of an 8-hour session, it's going to be a 30-minute session. Okay, so are you ready for a tea break? Can we be back at 5 to 11, please? 5 to 11. Okay, see you then.